Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Journey Through the Books of the Prophets. We've had a long break here, and we're at it again. We're going to pick up on chapter 22 of the book of SHMUEL. As I can't do a whole review, but what I can say is at the end of the 21st chapter, so here, and we're going to see today, it's almost all about Shaul chasing David and literally trying to kill him. And we're going to have episode after episode. But we ended already at the end of the 21st chapter, where David escapes to Gat. And there the king was Achish, and someone recognizes that this is David, especially recognize that this is the one who killed Goliath. And David picks up that he's been discovered. They run to the king and say, we think we have David here. And so the king comes. And so David feigns insanity. He starts acting like a mad person. And if you remember, Achish, his wife and his daughters were all mentally imbalanced, to put it mildly. And so when he sees this person acting like a mad person, he says, I don't have enough mad people in my own house. You bring me another person, throw him out. And so they threw him out of the city, and it saved David's life. And he wrote one of the Psalms that we say every Shabbat morning about this. So I don't think I shared a teaching about this incident, where at one point David says to Hashem, I think I understand everything about your creation, but I don't understand why you created mad people and spiders. And so God responded, by your life, someday you will need both of these. So here is the incident where David didn't understand what possible benefit to God or the world can mad people be. But here it actually saved his life. And the other incident is one of many, many that we've already talked about and we'll talk about today, of David hiding and escaping constantly from Shaul. Shaul was determined to kill David because he understood that if he didn't, his own kingship would not last, and his son would not become the king. And so he's trying to kill David. One of the times David is in a cave, and a spider came and wove a web. It was a small opening to the cave, but they were searching for him everywhere. So they came to this cave and they saw a spider web. So they figure, well, he can't be inside there because he would have had to break through the web. And they went on. And so that also saved his life. These are two incidences that are told about the two things that David couldn't understand, why God permitted these things in the world. So that's the end of chapter 21. We are going to continue on chapter 22 here. As we've been doing, we can't go over every verse. I'm just going to try to tell the story in as general a way as possible and try to put in a deeper understanding. So here it says that David departed from Gat, and it says that his brothers and all of his father's house heard where David was, and they joined him. Now, this is a very big thing because we've been following the whole story of David, and he was more or less an outcast in his own family. We're not going to retell the whole story, but he was not considered like one of the regular sons. And so really his whole life, he had this shadow over him that he wasn't treated as an equal in the family. And even when he killed Goliath, he originally went to the battlefield that his father sent him with food for his brothers. And his brothers treated him very not nicely. Here, already, David is as known as Shaul. He's really a national hero at this point. And yet, Shaul is trying to kill him. So here, the fact that the family didn't feel safe anymore. If Shaul is chasing David, maybe he's going to go after us as well. So here they join him. This is a big thing that they're relating to David, that they were all there when Shmuel anointed him, and he is going to be the next king. So here it says, though, along with his family, it says that everyone that was in distress, anyone who had a debt and couldn't pay it off, everyone who was discontented, they all gathered to David. David attracted all the outcasts. He himself was an outcast. And so obviously that energy, he was open to people who had kind of fallen through the cracks of society. It doesn't mean they were bad people or evil people, not at all. But they had a hard time fitting in, and they were attracted to David. And it says that 400 men gathered around him. So here I want to give over a Torah from Rav Ginsburg. And anyone who has his book on the Hebrew letters will find most of what I'm going to give over here in the letter Tav. Because the letter Tav equals 400. And so he explains the significance of the number 400. And here is one of the places, but the first time that it appears is when Avram buys the cave of Machpelah for 400 pieces of silver. And the Torah never gives us just a number without it being significant and symbolic. So here he's going to bury Sarah. She had just passed away in Hebron. Hebron comes from the root chibur, connection. And according to tradition, Hebron is the connection between this world and the world to come, because all of our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried in Hebron along with Adam and Eve. And it's considered the connection, the chibur, Hebron, between this world and the world to come. And there's an expression in the Zohar that in the world to come, there are 400 worlds of divine longing. And the word for longing is kisufim, which is the same root as 400 pieces of silver. And so here we have the first connection, that Avram is buying the burial cave for 400 pieces of silver, and in a deep mystical way, it's because Sarah becomes the first connection between this world and the world to come. She's the first Jew to be buried. Then later, Yaakov, excuse me, I'm going to add one more thing. In the Talmud, the sages talk about what are the dimensions of the land of Israel, of Eretz Yisrael. And they say 400 parsang by 400 parsang. These are like the bigger borders of Eretz Yisrael, the borders of Avram Avinu, the borders that David eventually more or less conquered. In all of Jewish history, the biggest, the largest boundaries of Eretz Yisrael was what David was able to conquer. And it came close to the bigger borders that God had promised to Avram. So here, the 400 pieces of silver that he is buying the cave of Machpelah, that's the first purchase of the land of Israel. And later, the sages say that the dimensions are 400 by 400. So we see a connection with the number 400. Then it continues with Yaakov. Yaakov flees from Esav, who wanted to kill him. He went, and that's when he married Rachel and Leah, and Zilpah and Bilhah, and he had all of the tribes. And now he's going to come back into Eretz Yisrael. He was in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, for 20 years. 20 squared equals 400. And now he's coming back into Israel, a land whose dimensions are 400 by 400. And in the Torah, it says that Esav came to meet him, meaning really to keep him out of Eretz Yisrael with 400 men. So Rav Ginsburg explains that these 400 men is the opposite energy of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is 400 by 400. And here come Esav and 400 men to prevent Yaakov from coming back. In the end, Yaakov defeats Esav, or the angel of Esav, when he was left alone. And then he meets him the next day. And Esav doesn't prevent him from coming back in. So Rav Ginsburg asked, at the end of the story, the 400 men are not mentioned again. In the beginning, it says Esav is coming with 400 men, but when Yaakov meets Esav, there's no mention of these 400 men. So Rav Ginsburg says, spiritually, well, what happened to these 400 men? Who were these 400 men? What did they represent? So we already said they represent the opposite force to keep Yaakov out of Israel. But Rav Ginsburg says that these souls, they were incarnated in the 400 men that joined David. And in the chapters that we're going to do today, it mentions sometimes 400 men and sometimes 600 men. And sometimes the 600 are broken down into 400 men and 200 men. So anyways, that is just a very beautiful line of connection, that the 400 men who join David, these are in a sense the sparks of the very souls that were trying to keep Yaakov out of Israel. They become the backbone, the main supporters of David, who then goes on and conquers the borders as close to 400 by 400 parsing by 400 parsing that we've ever had. So that is just a beautiful insight into who these 400 men are. And throughout the next chapters, and really the whole life of David, they were the first to join David. They became the main supporters of David HaMelech. Then David and it's not easy to understand, but he goes to the king of Moab and he asks if his father and mother and family can stay in Moab because he was afraid that Shaul would go after them as well. And here it doesn't mention what actually happened. He asked the king if his parents could stay there. Later, we learned that almost all of the brothers joined David. There's a tremendous tikkun. They also became part, let's say, of the 400 men, of the original supporters of David. But in the Mamlo Ez, it brings a tradition that the prophet Gad, G-A-D, not God, the prophet whose name was Gad, as the tribe of God, told David, don't stay here. It's not safe for you. You need to go back to the tribe of Yehuda. That's where David is from. And the Mamlo Ez, even though it doesn't say it in the text, brings the tradition that the king actually killed his parents. That David thought they would be safe there, but they weren't, and that they were killed. Though it doesn't mention it in the text itself. So now, Shaul, we're continuing chapter 22. It goes down to Binyamin, and he tries to gather up people to join his attempt to kill David. And then a new person is introduced here, even though he was hinted to before, and that's Doeg the Edomite. Doeg becomes a main enemy of David HaMelech. And so what happened is that Doeg comes and he tells Shaul, now this is something that we discussed already, so I'm not going to go back and tell the whole story, but when David is literally running for his life by himself, and he literally escaped from his own house, and his wife Michal helped him, even though she went against her father's wishes, but he escaped with literally the shirt on his back. So he comes to Nov. It was a city of Kohanim. And he tells, he hadn't eaten. So Avimelech was the main Kohen there. It was a city of Kohanim. And he told him he's on a special mission from the king. And he had to leave so quickly that he hadn't eaten. So can you spare some food? And then he said, also, can you spare a weapon? And it turns out that Avimelech was in the possession of the sword of Goliath. And so he didn't suspect anything. Here, David is the son-in-law of the king. He hadn't heard that King Shaul was trying to kill David. So he trusted what David said. He gave him bread, he gave him the weapon, and David left. Doeg was there and he witnessed the whole thing. Now he comes to Shaul, Doeg, and he tells him what happened. And he makes it that Avimelech on purpose was going against the king. He wasn't loyal to the king, and he was helping David, which was not the case. Doeg was totally lying about this. So Shaul calls in Avimelech and accuses him of being disloyal. And Avimelech says, it's not true. I didn't suspect anything. David is your son-in-law. He said he was on a mission from you. How is that? I acted accordingly. And so Shaul as we've discussed, is really has an evil spirit. That's how the text explains it. We've discussed how do we understand this evil spirit. And we've used terms like bipolar, schizophrenic, manic depressive, split personality. Any or all of those could describe what Shaul is going through. As we're going to see shortly, many times he turns around and he asks David to forgive him for chasing him and for wanting to kill him. And at that moment, he means it sincerely. So Shaul, his soul is terribly complex, and as the text calls it, like an evil spirit. And so Shaul tells his soldiers, kill everyone in the city. And the soldiers wouldn't do it because they understood that Avimelech was totally innocent and they would not do it. So Shaul turns to Doeg. He's the one who makes the accusation and he says, you do it. And Doeg did it. And it says that he killed on that day 85 people. And the justification that Shaul made in his mind is that in the Torah, there is a concept that we know that idol worship is considered one of the worst sins. And the Torah says that if someone is found worshiping idols and they're warned and they're witnesses and they continue to worship idols, then according to the court, it's like a death sentence. And then it says the same thing with an entire city. If it's heard that a whole city has left Torah and mitzvot and are worshiping idols, that you can't allow them to continue to do this. So Shaul used this, we'll call it excuse, because we're told that it really never happened. But here Shaul was using that to justify killing everyone because they were disloyal to the king. They weren't accused of worshiping idols, but very similarly, that if someone is disloyal to the king, then according, again, all of the stipulations have to be met. The king had the right to use capital punishment. So that's what Shaul did here. It was more that than this idea of the idol worship that I brought up. And then we're told that one of the sons of Avimelech survived, Eviatar. And he comes to David, and David promises to protect him. We can only imagine how David felt here. Because he was in a desperate situation, and it's true, he did not tell the truth to Avimelech. He didn't tell him the truth. And obviously he felt very responsible for what had happened. And so here the least he can do is he promises Eviatar that he will protect him. And then in the midst of all of this, the Philistines attack one of the cities named Keilah. And so David prays to God, what should I do? Is that I'm running for my life. I have to protect my life. But here, the whole city is in danger. So God tells him, go save the city. And that is what David does. And we're continuing here. We are now in chapter 23. And So what happens here is David escapes again. He actually defeats the Philistines, but then he's afraid that Shaul is again after him, and he escapes to the desert of Ziph. And here is, and here Jonathan meets with David. Now, if we remember, Jonathan, much to his father's disappointment and even outrage, he made a covenant with David. He, according to Pirkei Avot, this is an example of true love between people. Here, Jonathan had everything to lose on a personal level by befriending David and swearing loyalty to him, because he was meant to be the next king, and he's willing to give up everything because he understood who David was and that it was God's will. And he goes against his own, seemingly his own interests, and against his father's wishes. And here, Jonathan meets again with David in secret, and they renew their covenant between them. And Jonathan says, I know that you will be the next king, and I am totally for it. And they strengthened the covenant between them. And then Jonathan left. And then Shaul was told that where David is hiding out. And he goes to the people of Ziphim and tries to encourage them to tell him, where is David? And help me so I can kill him. And David again is running from Shaul. And David is surrounded. And he pursued him into the wilderness of Maon. And it said that Shaul is on one mountain, David is on the other. There's a valley in between. And right then, Shaul gets a message that the Philistines are attacking again. And he's still the king, and he's responsible for the people. So he leaves his chase of David to fight the Philistine. So David was able to escape, and he went to En Gedi. And of all of the places where David escaped to, and we've mentioned many of them already, very, very much the place of En Gedi is associated with David HaMelech. For those of you who have been in Israel, many of you have probably gone to En Gedi. It's down by the Dead Sea, and there's a waterfall there, and there's water. It's like an oasis in the middle of the desert. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I've been there many, 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 many times, hiking, and it's just really a beautiful place. And there's this energy of David HaMelech there. So he escapes to En Gedi. And it says Shaul came with 3,000 men to try to capture and kill David. And so here, Shaul went into a cave, and the men of David see where he goes into. And they say to David, this is your opportunity. You have to go and kill Shaul now. He's in the cave by himself. Actually, the text says he went to relieve himself. So he was by himself. So this is the opportunity for David to kill Shaul. And instead, David comes to the cave, and he um, he bows down to Shaul, and he tries to explain to him, why are you chasing me? What have I done to you? I am loyal to you. And David said to his men, God forbid that we should lay a hand on the anointed of God. And David repeats this a couple of times in different places. He understands, he's been anointed by SHMUEL. He understands that he will become the king. But he actually says to God at one point, if you want to take the kingship away from Shaul, you have to do it. I won't lay a hand on him. First of all, it's his father-in-law. He really is loyal to the king, and he won't. This is the greatness of David. He won't lift a finger. And he says to his men, like, don't you dare hurt Shaul. Instead, he goes and he tries to talk to him. And here we are in chapter 23. There's a whole speech by David saying, God should judge between you and me. God knows that I mean you no harm. Why are you trying to kill me? And here, this is one of many times that Shaul began to cry. And he says, you are more righteous than me. I've attributed evil to you, and I see that it's not true. And he promises him not to harm him. And he thanks him he understands that David could have killed him, or David's men could have killed him right there. And so he acknowledges that I've done wrong. I will leave you alone. But again, we've used these terms of bipolar, schizophrenic, split personality. Right after that, he just goes back, even though here he even says that I know that you will be king. I know you'll be king, and that it will be, and the kingship will be established in your hand. And he says, promise me that you won't destroy me and my family, which of course David never would have done. David swears to Shaul, and Shaul went home. But the very next thing, he's after him again. So here we're starting. Excuse me. We're starting chapter 25 now. Now the whole story changes somewhat. We're going to go through this fairly quickly. This is the whole story of Naval and Abigail. Up north, because David's moving around all over the place, and he also has this little army with him, and they have to survive. They have to eat, and they have to have places to sleep and everything. And so among all of the different travelings that are happening here, David's men are in the vicinity of a man named Naval. And he has a lot of sheep. And the men of David, in those days, there were robbers and thieves, and they would steal animals. And the men of David protected the possessions of Naval because it was the right thing to do. They were like hanging out there anyways, and so they were protecting. And so they're running out of provisions. David joins them and sends a message to Naval saying, we've been very, very good to you. Naval was very wealthy. We've been very, very good to your men and your possessions and your sheep and everything. Could you please give us something to sustain ourselves? Naval sends back a message like, who are you that I should give anything to you? And so David is outraged. He's really outraged that his men have been protecting this man's possessions, and he's very wealthy, and he won't acknowledge anything. And so David is going to go, and he is going to kill Nabal. One of the men tells the wife of Nabal, whose name was Abigail, telling her the whole story. Now, she understands immediately she has to take action. So she arranges a couple hundred loaves of bread and some wine, and it says parched corn and raisins. And she goes to David, like on the sly, with her servants, and she speaks to David. Now, again, I'm going through this very quickly, but this is all of chapter 25. It's a long, long chapter. And she comes to David and, in short, basically talks him out of killing Nabal. And she says something very interesting. And she says that he is like his name. So is he. Now, Nabal means like disgusting, like unworthy, maybe even an abomination. It's a very strange name for a person. And so she says, he is like his name. And there's actually many discussions in the Talmud, in Chassidut, Kabbalah, the importance of a person's name. And so here, now it's not 100% clear that was his real name. We know that there are many, many, many people, the names that they have are descriptions of who they were, not necessarily their actual names. But here, he is known as Nabal, and she says, well, he's, and she's married to him. He is like his name. Anyways, to make a long story short, she talks David out of killing Nabal, and he thanks her. And what's really interesting here is it says, this is the 25th chapter. She says to him, I know that you will become king, and when you become king, I will be your loyal servant. And she says, but don't spill blood like carelessly. It's not fitting for you to do. Like, calm down. And David is enchanted by her. The Talmud says she was incredibly beautiful, and he thanks her that you saved me from probably doing a sin, something that I shouldn't have done. And then she says to him, now in the text, she says this in the context of his maybe killing Nabal. And she says to him, you shouldn't let this be a cause of stumbling, nor offense of heart, that you will shed blood causelessly. That's what the text says. Nonetheless, the Talmud says between the lines here, she's telling him she sees that David is captured by her beauty, and he would sleep with her right on the spot if he could. And she, between the lines here, is saying, not just killing for no reason, but I am a married woman right now. Don't let your desire for me right now be a reason for an offense that will come back to haunt you. And the sages say that we have to understand that she is considered one of the 7 women prophetesses. All the other ones, they're either called a prophetess, or we could see in the story of their lives how they had prophecy. Here with Abigail, it's not apparent, but in this thing that she says to him, don't let this be a stumbling block to you. They say she was warning him not just about herself, but about Bathsheba, that she saw prophetically, that she could see in David's eyes that he really desired her. And she could see that if he wasn't checked, he might go ahead and fulfill his desires. And she said, don't let this be a stumbling block. But the sages say she was also seeing prophetically and warning him about the test that he had with Bathsheba, which he did not pass. In other words, again, he was enchanted by Bathsheba's beauty, and he took her before the time. The sages say that they really were soulmates. They say even from the time of Bereshit, they were meant for each other. And eventually they did marry, and they had Shlomo. And so it was meant to be, but David couldn't wait. So here we see, that's how the sages explain why she's one of the 7 prophetesses. And then, so the incident dies, and she even says, one second. Anyway, she went home, and she told, Naval was in the middle of a drunken party, and she revealed to him, by the way, I just saved your life. And she gave him musar, what were you thinking? And he was so shocked by what she was telling him, that it says that his heart turned to stone. And 10 days later, he passed away from this whole incident. And so what happens is David hears about this, and he sends a message to Abigail saying, I want to marry you. And he does. Abigail became his wife. And then right after that, it says that he also took another woman as his wife, Achinoam. And so here, in a short time, he marries 2 women. According to tradition, in those days, a king could marry 18 women. And according to tradition, David did. At different times, he married 18 women. And so the very next verse, well, what happened to Michal? That's the first woman that it says that he married. And so in the beginning of chapter 26, so it says, that Shaul took Michal. It doesn't explain what he did. He annulled their marriage somehow, or at least in his mind, and he gave her to another man. According to tradition, this other man was kind of forced into this, and Michal, in a certain way, was forced into this. And it says that this man never touched Michal sexually. He never touched her because he understood there's something wrong here. So that's how chapter 26 opens up. And We're just going to do chapter 26 quickly. And here again, Shaul is running after David and has a whole army with him. And David is like near the camp of Shaul. And his men say, let's sneak into the camp and kill Shaul. And again, David says, God forbid to touch the anointed of God. Nonetheless, David says, well, let's go in. And they plot that they're going to take his spear. And David is going to again try to explain to Shaul, here, I had another chance to kill you. And that's what they did. They snuck into the camp. Shaul is sleeping. Everyone is sleeping, including Avner. Avner is the head of Shaul's army. He's also sleeping. And Shaul's spear was right, like right near his hand, that if something happened, he could just grab his spear and protect himself. So David takes his spear, he goes outside of the camp, and then he yells to Shaul, and he explains, I have your spear. I had another chance to kill you. What do I have to do to convince you that I don't want to do you any harm? And again, he makes a whole speech saying you're misinterpreting who I am and what my desires are. I don't want to hurt you. I'm loyal to you. And again, and he taunts Avner and says, how is the general who's supposed to protect the king asleep? How could you let me take the king's spear? I could have killed him. I could have killed you. And he's trying to convince him. So here in chapter 26, like in the previous chapter, David gives a whole speech trying to prove to him that I'm not your enemy. I don't mean you any harm. And again, this is how chapter 26 ends, that Shaul, he says to David, he blesses him, he calls him my son, and he says, you're going to do great things, and you shall prevail. And David left, and it said Shaul went back to his place. Chapter 27, David again is like, he's running from Shaul. So that's where we're going to end for tonight. But I want to go back and do one thing. Give me 1 second. So part of okay, we're going back to the 24th chapter. And here, I want to end the class tonight with this very deep, deep insight, is that when David is speaking to Shaul in one of these attempts to convince him that he means him no harm. So it's in chapter 24, verse 13. So he says like this. He says, Ka'asher Yomar Mashal Akadmoni. As part of his convincing, he says, just like it says in the ancient proverb, Mirashayim Yetzei Rasha, from evil ones come evil. V'yedei lo tiyeh bach. But my hand shall not be upon you. So he says, there's this ancient proverb that says evil comes from evil people. I'm not evil. So I don't attribute this idea that I want to kill you to me, because evil only comes from evil people. Okay, so here I want to read a Rashi that quotes this. This is a very, very important Rashi. This is in Parshat Mishpatim. This is after we received the Torah, the first chapter, one of the three parshas that has the most mitzvot. And one of the mitzvot is, anyone who wants to look it up, we're in the 21st chapter of the book of Shemot, of Exodus. It says, Makeh ish v'met mot yumat. A man who kills another man, he deserves the death penalty. But then it says, V'asher lo tzada v'ha'elokim anali yado v'samti l'cha makom asher yanu shama. But if someone isn't like hunting to hurt another person, but inadvertently, and it says, and God puts it into his hand, and inadvertently he causes a person to be killed. So the Torah says, "V'samti l'cha makom asher yanu shama." I will give you a place for you to run to. This is what's called the cities of refuge. The Torah repeats this idea of a city of refuge many times, and this is the first mention of it. It's all in one verse. So the idea here is, the question is, if someone kills on purpose, they deserve to be killed. But if you kill inadvertently, by accident, but there's still some culpability. So you have to flee to a city of refuge. But the mystery of this verse is, and God puts it into your hand. So the question is, what does that mean? Did God cause this person to kill the other person inadvertently? What does it mean? So Rashi quotes this verse that we just learned that David says to Shaul, when he says that there's an ancient proverb that says, evil comes from evil people. Evil comes from evil. So Rashi, to explain, what does it mean that God put it into his hand? So he says, V'lama teitzei zot milfanav. Why did this whole occurrence happen? Meaning, what does it mean that God put it into his hand? Hu she'amar David. This is what David says. Kasher yomar mashala kadmoni mirashayim lo yetzei rasha. So Rashi brings this verse from SHMUEL that says that in this ancient proverb, it says that evil only comes from evil people. And he quotes this verse in SHMUEL, and he continues, Umoshel kadmoni. So then the question, what is this ancient proverb? What are we talking about? So Rashi says an amazing thing. He says, Umashal kadmoni hu haTorah. The Torah itself is an ancient proverb, a mashal, meaning that when we talk about learning the Torah according to Pardes, the simple literal meaning, the alluded to meaning, pshat and remez and drush, that the symbolic, allegorical, metaphorical parable of the Torah, this is what we're talking about. There's a whole level that we can understand the entire Torah as this ancient parable. It's really an astounding thing that Rashi is revealing here. And Shehu, so he says, Mashala Kanmoni hu Torah. Shehi Mashal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is God's parable. The Torah is God's parable. Shehu Kadmoni Shel Olam, because he is the most ancient of anything. God is the first cause. And so he is the most ancient, and his allegory, his metaphor to the world is the Torah. And then Rashi goes on to explain, well, what is going on here? What does it mean that God put him in his hand? So Rashi, this is a classic Rashi, says the case here is a classic example of mida keneged mida, a measure for measure. So when it says that God put it in his hand, what it's saying is, even when a person kills inadvertently, there's something in this person's soul history that has set him up that killing someone else inadvertently is going to come through his hand. So the example that Rashi brings is, what are we talking about? So it says the case is God invites two people to a hotel. One of them is someone who killed someone else on purpose, but there were no witnesses, and he was never judged or tried. And another person who killed inadvertently, but again, there were no witnesses, and he wasn't tried, and he didn't go to a city of refuge. So the one who killed on purpose is sitting in a chair under a tree. And the one who killed inadvertently climbs up the tree, maybe to pick some fruit or whatever. He climbs up the tree. He falls off the ladder onto the person who killed on purpose, and the person died. So Rashi says here we see justice being performed. The one who killed on purpose is now killed. And the one who killed inadvertently, this time they're witnesses. And he shouldn't have been up in the tree in the first place. He didn't do it on purpose, but he was careless. And he ended up killing this purpose. And now they're witnesses, so he has to flee to a city of refuge. So this is how Rashi takes this verse that we just learned in Shmuel, and he explains this whole incident, it's very, very profound, this Rashi, the way he's calling the Torah the parable of God, and that God is the Ancient of Days. In Kabbalah, one of the ways we refer to God is Atik Yomim, the Ancient of Days, or Atika Kadisha, the Holy Ancient One. And so here, Rashi is alluding to all of this from the verse that we learned. So tonight, we were able to go through chapters 22 through 26, and we will pick up next week. Okay, as we always do, we're now going to record the insights into the Haftarah. Welcome everyone to Insights into the Weekly Haftarah. This week's Torah portion is Bahalotcha, the third parsha of the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. And it begins, this is a very, very full parsha. There are many, many, many things that happen. We always look for what is the connection to the Haftarah, what in the parsha is going to be mirrored by the Haftarah. And here we see that the first incident in the parsha is about Aaron being commanded to light the menorah in the temple. And there's a very, very important Rashi here that says that the mitzvah of lighting the menorah is ad hashalhevet ola mi'aleha, until the flame rises up on its own. Meaning, in practical terms, it means that if the Kohen lights the menorah and then walks away from it before he's sure that it's going to stay lit, then he hasn't done the mitzvah. So the ad hashalhevet ola mi'aleha, until the flame rises up on its own power, and it's sure to continue to burn. And so we're told that this word shalhevet, first of all, we learn from this something very, very important, this idea of completing an action. So many times we want to do a certain task or accomplish a certain purpose or mission, but we don't carry it out to the end. We lose interest, we lose enthusiasm, and we don't carry it out to the end. So here we're told that the mitzvah of lighting the menorah is until the mitzvah is complete and the flame rises up on its own. Shalhevet means a flame. And so this word shalhevet equals 737, which equals b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol moedecha, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might or means. So here it's telling us that when we're serving God, it's not, the words aren't taken lightly. With all your heart, all your soul, all your might. It has to be like a flame. It has to be with your whole being. So that's how the parsha begins. It's actually just a short passage, and then it goes on to other things. So the part of the parsha that was picked for the Haftarah is going to relate to the menorah. And so the Haftarah comes from Zechariah, the 2nd chapter through the 4th chapter. And here, it's a very, very important Haftarah, because this is one of the few Haftarahs that's actually repeated on the Shabbos of Hanukkah. Because Hanukkah, of course, when we light the Hanukkah lights, it's in remembrance of lighting the menorah, rededicating the temple and lighting the menorah again. So we read the same Haftarah on the Shabbos of Hanukkah. And the connection to the menorah doesn't come to the end of the Haftarah. And here, first of all, God reveals to Zechariah that despite the exile that the Jewish people are in, remember this, Zechariah lived at the time of the end of the first exile in Babylonia. And so God is promising that the exile would not last forever, and that God would bring the Jewish people back to their homeland. And then Zechariah showed me a vision of the high priest, Yoshua, and there is an angel of God there, and also Satan. This is one of the few places that Satan is named in the Tanakh. It's not the only place, but it's one of the few. And Satan has come to accuse the high priest of falling short of his responsibilities. And the reason that is brought is that apparently in Babylonia, and it's one of the main parts of the book of Ezra, that many Jews intermarried, and they married non-Jewish wives. And many of them even came back to Israel with their non-Jewish wives. And apparently Yoshua, the high priest, his sons also married non-Jewish women. And Satan was accusing him that, how did you allow this to happen? I don't see that you really try to do anything to stop this. So he's accusing. And amazingly, God comes and defends Yoshua. And he calls him a Ud Mitzal Me'esh, Mutzal Me'esh. He's like a firebrand that has been rescued from the flames. Now, this is very an important kind of a phrase, because here God, it's clear that Yoshua wasn't 100%, but God is looking for some way to defend him. And he says he's like a firebrand who's been saved from the fire. In other words, the exile has been a terrible exile. And Satan, like, you're not the one to judge what a person's been through. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because this reminds me very, very much of many things that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said about those who had survived the Holocaust. Even those who left Yiddishkeit, left Judaism, and many of them actually married non-Jewish women, and they were so angry at God for allowing the Holocaust, or at least in their minds, they blamed God, and they left Judaism altogether. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said many, many times, who are we to judge? We have no idea what these people went through. Like, we have no idea. It's not for us to judge anyone in general, but especially someone who's been saved like a firebrand from the fire. So I just wanted to connect that to a real situation. And then it says that Yoshua, again, this is a vision that Zechariah is having. And Yoshua is wearing soiled clothes, which represents that he's not blameless here. But God is trying to find merit. And the angel says to the high priest, Yoshua, take off these soiled garments, and by doing this, you'll be taking off your iniquity and put on these fresh garments. And then the angel warns Yoshua that from now on, you do have to follow my ways in God's name. And if you're going to be a high priest, you have to be worthy of it. And then he says a very important thing that's quoted all the time, where the angel says to him, "V'natati lecha mehalchim bein ha'omdim ha'ela." Now remember, this is an angel, and this is like an angelic vision that is happening, that Zechariah is witnessing, is experiencing. And so the angel says to Yeshua that if you listen and you will follow God's ways, I will place you as a mover among those who don't move. So this is quoted like all the time in explaining the difference. Who are the ones who are not moving? The angels. And so this is brought as, we'll call it, the proof text that in essence, a human being is at a higher level than an angel. An angel has no free will, or at least not how we understand free will. An angel does the bidding of God, and he does it without question. A person can deny God, can make good choices and bad choices. So it's explained, this verse is used all the time that when you use your free will correctly, you are called a mover among those who don't move. Even though the angels are considered like at such a high level, which they are, but they don't have the tests of a human being. And so when we use our free will correctly, we actually rise to a higher level than an angel. And then towards the end of this vision, Zechariah is shown a menorah. And at first, he's shown a stone that has 7 eyes. And this is like the stone that will establish the temple. And then the angel says to Zechariah, "What do you see?" And Zechariah said, I see a menorah, and it's made entirely of gold. And in each of the flames of the menorah, there are 7 like channels of oil filling it. Now, this is significant because it's 7 times 7. There's 7 branches of the menorah, and each one has these 7 tubes coming into it. And next to it, on either side, are olive trees, because only olive oil was used in the menorah. And so that's the vision that he sees. He sees a menorah with 7 branches, and it has really 7 times 7 tubes of oil flowing into it. And the angel says to him, Zechariah, says to the angel, "What is all of this?" And the angel says, "You don't know what this is?" And Zechariah says, "No." In other words, he understood it was a menorah and olive trees, but he didn't understand the significance of it. And so the angel says, "This is the word of God to Zerubbabel." Zerubbabel was from the house of David, and he would be instrumental in the return of the exiles from Babylonia and the reestablishment of the second temple. And here the Haftorah ends with a very, very beautiful statement from God. And it says like this. I'll read it in Hebrew. Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, ki im b'ruchi amar Hashem Tzevakot. Not through strength and not through valor, but through my spirit, says God of hosts. And then he says to Zerubbabel, who will become the leader, that you'll become like a great mountain. And he says a great mountain before you, Zerubbabel, will become a plain. In other words, there'll be no obstacle to you. I will be with you because my spirit will be with you. And he shall bring forth this stone. Remember the stone that had these 7 eyes, and that was the main stone that would establish the temple. And it ends by saying that Zerubbabel will bring forth the main stone to shouts of beauty, beauty to it. Chen, chen la. That the temple would be rebuilt, and it would be a focus of beauty. Now, it's significant, as I said, that this Haftarah is read on the Shabbos of Hanukkah, and the two-letter gate, meaning the two-letter root of the word Hanukkah is chen, which means grace. So here the Haftorah ends chen la, that the temple would be a place of beauty. And then many years later, the Maccabees would come and rededicate the temple and relight the menorah. And from that we have the holiday of Hanukkah, whose root is chen la, beauty, beauty to it. So I want to end with one very important thing, is that this vision of Zechariah, I'm showing you right here, this is the official symbol of the state of Israel. It is directly from this vision of Zechariah. Here you have, of course, the menorah, and here this represents the two olive trees, two olive branches. And so this actual symbol of the state of Israel comes from the Haftorah, comes from this Haftorah. And so may we see the rebuilding of the third temple, and may it be to shouts of chen la.